Hi, this is Shalimar, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about using a textbook more successfully so that it's easier for you to get the information you need to in your classes. You may see little skips once in a while. That's just us pausing so I can reset things to be more easy for you to understand. I hope you get a lot of information out of this workshop. Thank you. So when you first open a textbook, for a lot of people it can be pretty overwhelming because you're dealing with a large amount of text and a lot of information that you know is supposed to be important, but you have no way of telling what exactly do I need to know in here. So what I want to tell you is don't panic. There are a lot of tips and things that I can give you that will help you make it easier to find the information that you actually need. So the first thing that you want to do is to find out what do you need to know from your textbook. In most textbooks, there are some items that help you pinpoint the important sections of the chapter that you're working on. So the first one of those is the chapter objectives. And these are found generally at the beginning of a chapter. Not every textbook does objectives, but most of them do these days. And what they're going to tell you is the main points that you're supposed to have learned information about in that chapter. So for example, in this book about web design, they tell you the chapter objectives. In this chapter, you will learn about the evolution of the internet and standards, the beginning of the World Wide Web, and client-server models. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is the key terms, chapter summary, and review questions, which are going to be at the end of the chapter. And you may, again, not find all of these parts in every textbook, but generally they will have some combination of them. So key terms may also be called the glossary, and it's going to tell you what some of the big words that they want you to learn in the chapter are. So this gives you items that you know will probably want to be in your notes, things that you're going to look for information on in the chapter. Review questions will tell you what the author thought were the main points of the chapter. And so those are things that you may want to write the questions down before you do the reading, and that way you can answer them during the chapter and you know you've covered everything that you need to. There may also be some kind of a chapter summary here. It's a very brief paragraph. All right, so the next thing that you want to look at is the pictures and headings in your chapter. And these two sections are going to give you some basic information about how the chapter is organized and the order that things are going to occur in the chapter, which tells you maybe what subheadings you want in your notes, or it may just help you figure out which sections are the ones that your teacher was really aiming towards. So first I recommend that you go through and look for all of the chapter headings. For example, you can see here, this is portion 1.6 of the chapter. It's still in chapter 1, but it's telling us that this section of the book, which is probably going to be a page or two, is talking about the client-server model. And then I also want you to look at any pictures or diagrams that are included. And you're going to want to read if there are any little phrases underneath them. And what this is going to allow you to do is get an idea of the concepts from the chapter, but also it's going to make it so that when you go to read in the chapter, the pictures are less distracting because you already know what they say. You don't need to stop to look at them. You just remember what they said in context with what the textbook is telling you. So for the next section, there's no specific part of your textbook that it relates to, but I want to talk about using your time. One thing that happens to a lot of people is that they try to read the entire section through as quickly as possible. And what that does is stress you out, and by the end you can barely remember what you started out with. You get things confused in your mind, mixed up, and by the end you're so burned out that you can't remember anything you've read in the last half hour. So what I recommend is that you take breaks. Get up and move around a little bit, because your knees are not designed to be bent completely the entire time. If you have your knees locked in one position, whether it's folded or straight, they cut off the blood flow in your body, and it pools, and you get less blood flow in your brain, you get swelling in your feet. It's all very uncomfortable. So what I suggest is that for every hour that you are working, you should put at least 10 minutes that you get up and move around, whether that's going to get a drink, hitting the bathroom, walking around the block, going to talk to your family for 10 minutes, or even just sitting on something else like a couch or something like that, where you're relaxing a little bit more. And for most people, what they find is that if they do that, they come back more relaxed and more focused on the information than they were when they left. Now in this section I'm going to talk about making sure that you're not overloading yourself with too much information at once. So what I recommend is that you start with one subsection of a chapter. So for example, I would start here and read the 1.1 section, which is just this one page on the evolution of the internet. And then I would go in and take my notes on this section and answer any questions that I know from the review are about this section. After I've done that and had a moment to let that sink in, then I would move on to another subsection. And again, just do one at a time. And what this does is allow you to remember what you've just read, write your notes on it right then so that it gets more into your long-term memory. And then that way you don't end up at the end of the chapter going, okay, I remember what the last section was, but I have no idea what the first section or any of the middle sections were about. So do them one at a time, and it's probably going to make it a lot easier for you. Some people even prefer to do a paragraph at a time and write their notes. So the last tip that I want to give you on reading in your textbook right now is the concept of page isolators or magnifiers. And the reason I talk about this is because for most people, a lot of text on a page, especially with nothing to break it up, can be really distracting or confusing, and we call that page clutter. And for some people it's just overwhelming, and by the time they get halfway through a sentence, they can't remember what else they saw on it because they're focused on how much they still have to read. So for that, what I use is something called a page separator or an isolator. And you can make these out of any kind of paper or cardstock. And what you want to do is just cut a slice out that's going to show you 1 or 2 paragraphs at a time. And that way you can read the section that you're focused on. It kind of blocks out the other information, and you just slowly move it down the page as you go. And you can get just the sections that you want information on. Now these can be made basically any size that you want, comparing to the text that's on your page. So for example, if this page had text basically all the way across and was wider, then I would have cut my page separator this direction so that it could take up more space. In the alternative, if you have a regular sized book and not a textbook, you can make something out of just a 3x5 note card or a 4x6. And this still gives you enough isolation to make it so that you can just focus on small sections at once. And this again goes along with the concept of just doing one subsection at a time so that you don't get overwhelmed. These are just a few different tips that you can do with reading textbooks, and I hope that some of them help you. But the thing to remember is that not everyone learns the same way. Not every textbook is going to be as easy to read as others. Using some of these tips, you can make it easier for yourself. If these don't work, keep looking around until you find other ones that are more effective. Thank you very much.